This week on Quadriga, Germany votes. Merkel forever? Even now, with less than 3 weeks to go before Election Day, the campaign still lacks real punch. More than 17 million people watched the only TV debate between German Chancellor Angela Merkel and Social Democrat challenger Per Steinbrück. But pollsters and the media generally concluded that there was no clear winner. In the Bundestag this week, the two candidates continued to square up to one another. However, with the SPD still trailing far behind Merkel's Conservatives, the result for many seems a foregone conclusion. Or does the large percentage of swing voters still have a surprise in store? Your host this week, Ali Aslan.
Hello and welcome to Quadriga. Forbes magazine has repeatedly named Chancellor Merkel as the most powerful woman in the world, and a third term would certainly consolidate that title. And now, with a little less than 3 weeks to go before the election, many people are wondering what a third term would actually mean for Chancellor Merkel, for Germany, and perhaps most importantly, for Europe. And that is exactly what we're going to talk about on today's show, together with three individuals who've been following events and this election very closely. Welcome to Quentin Peel, who is the chief correspondent for the Financial Times in Germany. He's also an associate editor at the Financial Times. He's been with the newspaper since 1975 and previously served as its international affairs editor. Eric T. Hansen is an American journalist and author based here in Berlin. He writes a weekly column for the German newspaper Die Zeit and has recently published a book titled The Faint-Hearted Superpower: Why Germany Makes Itself Look Smaller Than It Actually Is. And Christiane Meyer is a correspondent for the German public broadcaster ARD, where she covers various German political parties as well as Chancellor Merkel. Previously, she served as the network's US correspondent. Welcome to you all. Welcome to this program. Eric T. Hansen, you've lived in Germany for about 30 years. 30 is a long time, and you've seen your fair share of German elections. And many people are saying and criticizing that this year, this election, is particularly dull, that it lacks in enthusiasm and energy. Would you agree?
I would agree, but I would also say that I haven't really seen an exciting election in Germany yet. Most of them are a little bit dull. German politicians talk a lot about details, about percentages and policy, and it tends to be restricted to things that are small domestic issues. Like this year we have minimum wage, yes or no. Well, neither party really cares about minimum wage, and neither do the people. Frankly, it's not a huge issue. It's not like, should we bomb Syria? That's where you get emotions going. But minimum wage,
And Quentin Peel, would you agree that this election campaign is no different than the ones before, as Eric T. Hansen is saying? Or is this one really particularly dull?
I'm a political junkie. I find elections amazing. I love them, and I love the interplay. So I'm not finding it dull. But having said that, the opinion poll lines are desperately flat. Nothing's really happening out there. Yes, indeed, they're not really talking about the big issues, but they're coming through. And the fact that the whole thing is still a cliffhanger. I wrote at the beginning, this is either going to be a coronation or a cliffhanger. Actually, it's a cliffhanging coronation. We don't know whether Angela Merkel is going to get her crown back, because at the end of the day, we're only talking about a percentage point between potential coalitions.
The percentage point between the coalitions, but if we look at the comparison when the Chancellor goes head-to-head with her challenger, Steinbrück, we see a lead by 15 points. So clearly the people don't seem to be in a mood for change.
Yeah, that is right. People are not in the mood for change because they think Merkel steered them through the crisis all right, didn't lose too much money and felt safe. They feel actually safe with her. Why would they change? So it's a big challenge for the challenger to actually get across his point. What would he do differently? What would he do better? And why should people give away their security and their feeling of well-being and being safe with her for somebody unknown? So that is what he's up against. And at the same time, there are a lot of people who are not sure what they're going to vote, which is different from the other elections before. There seems to be incredible amount of people who are totally undecided what they're going to vote for.
Eric T. Hansen, the notion out there is that there are hardly any differences between the two major parties in Germany, between the Christian Democrats and the Social Democrats. Would you agree with that assessment?
Well, I would agree, and I think that's a major problem for the SPD. But it's also, you can look at it as a major problem for the SPD because it doesn't have an ideology anymore. But you can also look at it as a kind of like a triumph for the SPD because in the the 1920s there were huge differences between the ruling class and the working class, and now the working class is fairly well secure and doing well, and the politics are very much in favor for the little guy. It still swings. The government still swings much more to the upper, the corporate classes, but the little guy is not suffering like they were in the 1920s. And so basically, the whole idea of the SPD, of the red side of the spectrum, to do more for the working class, they've succeeded. And now they don't really have anything to really fight for. They can say, we need a little bit less exploitation of the working class, but they have, no one's starving here. So the SPD kind of needs a new ideology, or it's becoming, CDU's younger brother, basically.
But what's so interesting about Germany at the moment is that actually the centre of gravity of politics has shifted ever so slightly to the left of centre. There is a majority in Germany to the left of centre, and yet the natural government tends to be to the right of centre. So there is this. And that's where Merkel has been so brilliant, because she has done what Tony Blair tried to do in Britain. She's grabbed the middle ground. And every time the SPD comes up with a remotely interesting policy, she steals it, totally cynically. And so she's grabbed the middle ground, whereas the SPD is lagging so far behind, they can't go for the middle ground. They're just desperately trying to get their own natural voters out to vote. And that's their problem.
I don't totally agree. She has been brilliant, you said that, but is she still brilliant? Because as you say, the middle shifted a little bit, and I totally disagree. The little guy is not doing so well. Only the people who have jobs, they are doing well. But the ones who have to go into these sort of restricted jobs only for a year, for 2 years, they are in big problems, and they do need the minimum wage. So that, even though you describe it as a small and not emotional issue, I think it is an emotional issue because it's about justice. And the German public has become aware that things are going a little bit through the banking crisis out of hand. People getting richer and other people getting poorer, and they don't really want to pay for the rich people. I mean, it sounds pretty basic, but it is there. The feeling is there. And that is, I think, what she hasn't yet sort of conquered. That moment. So I think that's going to be decisive.
And indeed, let's keep in mind that even though the economy is doing very well in Germany, Germany is still the biggest low-pay sector in Europe as well. Let's talk about the TV debate just for a moment. Many people, once again, I have to use the term dull. Many people characterize the debate as dull. And I think the one thing that came out of it that sparked the most debate was the necklace of the Chancellor. And I think that was rather telling.
Well, that's often, I come from America, and so we always have these debates, and a lot of times it's also very dull. And what people seize on is little things like Nixon sweated. That's everyone knows today. Still, decades later, that Nixon sweated. It was a big thing. No one knows what they actually talked about, but he sweated, and that's this little thing that she was brilliant enough to wear. It showed that she, likes her country, which shouldn't be, that weird. And in comparison, Steinbrück stood there with his blue thing. He could have been standing in front of a corporate boardroom. It had nothing to do with Germany or with the nation. And it was actually brilliant.
Do you
Excuse me, but I think you really overestimate the Twitter accounts. Only because 20,000 people Twitter about the necklace, so what, And you underestimate the German voters, because I think even though it might have been not super duper interesting and a little dull at times, especially in the beginning, but people are very curious, and they did listen quietly and they listened well, which is why in the end Steinbrück, I think, got a better outcome out of it, because they did listen to the arguments and not necessarily look at the necklace only.
I agree that Steinbrück won the debate, because the expectations of Steinbrück were very low, and the fact that he was really level pegging, if not a little bit in front. He was more relaxed. I think this was a moment we actually saw Steinbrück just relax into this final stretch of the election campaign. So at last we've got a bit of a set two going for the last 2.5 weeks we've got. And that makes it interesting, even though the gap is very wide. Because as I said at the beginning, it's not the gap between the personalities or the gap between the parties that matters in the end. It's the numbers to form a coalition, and that's much closer.
And many pundits saw this TV debate as perhaps a lost chance for the challenger, for Steinbrück, to narrow the gap.
I think we're going to see the polls narrowing, maybe not enough. If you think that the SPD is on about 25%, give or take, the CDU is on 40%. If the SPD can get to 30%, it's a big if. But you know, we've had several elections in Germany where in the last few weeks you've had shifts of up to 10 points in the polls. I mean, in 2005, Angela Merkel very nearly lost, having been ahead 10 points. She remembers that very much, which is why she's being so careful.
And a big chunk of the TV debate was, of course, devoted to the Euro crisis, Christiane Meyer. And you could argue that this election and the outcome is not only important to the 80 million Germans, but indeed to the 250 million people in the Eurozone. Do you think Europe is watching particularly carefully and closely this election?
I hope so, because the different opinions and points of view they were putting across stand for different opinions in Europe as well. What would you do? I mean, Steinbrück argues that you can't only have the policy of austerity, you also have to have some kind of, he calls it a Marshall Plan for Europe, where you help through investment to get the southern states to more prosperity. And Merkel is very strong on the austerity point. So it's something to watch, and it's very interesting. But at the same time, when I see them, I always remember the picture when they're both standing in front of German cameras next to each other. She was the chancellor, he was the minister of finance, and they would say, "We guarantee your savings," you know? And that is a picture I can get out of my head. So how different are their positions eventually? I mean, the SPD basically was with her in every single decision on the financial crisis. So it's difficult now to point out that you're on a different, completely different agenda.
And Eric T. Hansen, the German economy, as we have pointed out, is strong. Unemployment is very low, particularly compared to its Euro neighbors and Euro partners. Chancellor Merkel has called Germany during the debate repeatedly the engine of growth and the anchor of stability in Europe. Is Germany under particular scrutiny here?
Yes, absolutely. I think more and more Germany is becoming the leader of Europe, and I think Europe is becoming, even though don't want to admit it, is becoming closer together and will eventually become almost a single state, a federation of states and not just a union. And I think that's something that the politicians are particularly not talking about because they don't want to scare the Germans. So they're only talking about the money, and we're not going to spend any money, and the money will be okay, and your savings will be okay. But in the end, I think after September, both candidates, whoever wins, they're going to spend a lot of money on Europe, and they're going to confirm Germany's power and Germany's position as the leader of Europe, and also the center of Europe. And I think a lot of people, even though in outside of Europe, everyone is complaining about Germany because Germany is not giving them enough money, or Germany is doing this or that wrong. They're all complaining about what Germany is doing wrong, but no one is saying we need a different country to lead us. They're all looking to Germany for the money and for the rule making and for leadership. And that's going to be in the next couple of years, we're going to see that much stronger.
But Quentin Peel, when it comes to leadership, Germany is in a bit of a dilemma, isn't it? Because on one hand, everybody is looking for leadership in Germany, but at the same time, once Germany puts down its foot, it's not right either. So it's damned if you do and damned if you don't for Chancellor Merkel, isn't it?
Yeah, I think Germany hates being in this position. As everybody says, Germany wants to be a big Switzerland, prosperous and neutral and not bullying. Now, having said that, Germany is very stubborn in what it wants. So on the Eurozone crisis, you know, there have been these red lines that Germany was not going to cross. And all decisions in the end had to wait for Berlin to make up its mind. So that's one thing. The other thing is, and I think we should never forget this, Germany is chronically provincial. This is a very federal country that is very inward-looking and very local. I mean, Berlin, the capital city of Germany, is a desperately provincial city. It's not yet a world city. And its politics are provincial and local. So actually people are interested in very local issues often, and not in global issues. I mean, Eric said early on, you know, not big issues like do we bomb Syria? Hey, nobody in Germany is dreaming of bombing Syria. They don't want to have anything to do with it. They want to have a minimum wage. Hey.
I don't know what to say. First, I have to defend Berlin. I think, you know, provincial city, you must be joking. You love it here.
Everyone loves Berlin. We're just saying, yeah.
Well, that's an entirely different topic for an entirely different show.
Apart from that, yes, Germany is a reluctant leader. I would give you that, of course. And of course, Germany doesn't want to get involved in any wars at all, you know. At the same time, I mean, there is a moral issue. You can't always keep out of everything because then you're guilty too. So people are discussing that. They are discussing, you know, what do we do? Well, how can we help? And can we actually pretend to be the peaceful nation and watch people getting killed, you know? So it is an issue, and I think you underestimate that as well. It is an emotional issue for Germans as well, but at the same time, with our past, everybody has been brought up by, you know, it's in our genes. You don't want to bomb any country ever again, you know, and you don't want to be on that side. So it's very difficult for Merkel at the moment, this predicament. The Germans don't want to bomb Syria, just as an example. And she, at the same time, wants to show that she's behind the United States, different from Libya last time when we had a different stand on that and went basically with Russia and China. So very difficult for her to do that, and very difficult for the German people also, I think, to get used to the idea that maybe leading doesn't only involve economic leading, but maybe people are looking to us as well for guidance in other issues.
Eric Tianzen, in your book, you argue that Germany makes itself smaller than it actually is. How to solve this dilemma, though? How can Germany break out of its shell?
Well, it's a matter of talking about it and becoming more and more aware. And I think the Syria issue is also interesting because people are talking about whether, you know, it's right to intervene, whether it's not right to intervene. Most Germans have this big moral thing where all intervention is morally wrong. But then they're saying, like you said, you know, people are dying over there. But at the same time, the problem is not whether to intervene or not. The problem is who takes the initiative. And right now, it's the Bürgerkrieg, the civil war has been going on for some time, and the U.S. says now, let's intervene. And so all of a sudden, everyone else is saying, well, should we intervene or not intervene? But that's not a leadership position. The leadership position is the U.S. taking the initiative and saying, should we or should we not? And that should have been years ago, and I think it could have been actually Germany who took the initiative, who said, should we intervene or should we not intervene? And I'm not talking about military intervention. That would not happen in Germany. But Germany could have said, look, let's find a political solution, let's find a diplomatic solution a year ago. They could have done it, but they didn't do it because they aren't in the mentality of having a leadership position or taking the initiative. And that's what is going to change, I think, over the next probably decades.
Can I bring this back to the election? Because there's a very interesting issue here. The only times Germany has intervened outside its own area in recent years, it's been an SPD Green government that's done it. The left has been the interventionist. The right wing has been very, very hesitant about doing anything. I remember seeing Helmut Kohl standing up 20 years ago and saying, we will never be able to send a German soldier to the Balkans. Absolutely clear. And what's Angela Merkel's track record on this? It actually is no to Libya, and on Syria, absolutely clear. Even if we decided it were right for somebody else to intervene, it will never be us. Now, so there is a very interesting issue here. It's been the left in Germany that actually has, if you like, lived up to this bigger global role.
And why is that so? Because they want to defend not a country and not a party, but the human rights. And I think that's a totally different issue, but probably one has to redefine certain things in world politics, because now in these tiny asymmetrical wars, you know, you don't defend a country, a government, or a group. You have to defend human rights. And that is something people can't really deal with yet, I think. And coming to the leadership position, yes, there have been, I mean, Westerwelle, our foreign minister, he said he was looking for a political solution, only that nothing happened for a year. So that in itself is not leadership, I think.
And one issue, of course, where all of Europe, if not even the world, is looking for leadership towards Germany is the euro crisis. As I said, a big part of the debate was devoted to this very issue. And Chancellor Merkel has been widely criticized for her handling of the euro crisis, particularly by the southern European countries, namely by imposing the austerity measures. Let's play the scenario through. If Challenger Steinbrück would be Chancellor on October 1st or whatnot, do you think anything would change as far as Germany's position towards the euro crisis? Quentin Peel.
I think that there would be more inclination to get growth moving. So the growth part of the balance of growth against austerity would be stronger. I think that the possibilities of going down the road to some sort of common debt instrument like a Eurozone bond or something might start to come through. Now, Angela Merkel's very negative about that. So if it's a grand coalition with both of them in power, even if it's not Mr. Steinbrück, but the SPD as well as the CDU, that's going to be a huge debate where they go. But to be honest, at the end of the day, I think that German policy will not move very much on the euro. Essentially, German policy right across the spectrum is, if we're going to give more money, we need more rules, and we're going to set those rules.
And indeed, Eric, Hansen, a lot of German voters are fearing what will happen after the election. They're fearing that they're in for some very negative and bad surprises, such as to accept, for instance, the losses on loans made so far to Greece, that a banking union will come, that Germany will agree to euro bonds, that in general there'll be much more Europe than before. Do you think those concerns are legitimate?
I think they're very legitimate. I think that's what's going to happen. I think there's going to be, Germany is going to pay for the failures of a large part of Europe, just like it paid for many years for the failures of East Germany. It's going to be the same thing we saw, and it's going to pay and pay and pay. It's going to have the money. It's not going to go into, abject poverty. It's not going to fail, and it will succeed after 10, 20 years in whatever it's doing. But it's going to pay, and people are going to be upset about that, and that's why people are not talking about it as much as they should now before the election. And I agree. It's both SPD or CDU. They're both going to pay.
One of the things about this election campaign on Europe is that the Social Democrats know that Europe is not a vote winner for them, because their policy would be to be a bit more generous. And that's not a very popular policy for the ordinary German voter. I regret to say the ordinary German voter is probably where Bild Zeitung is, saying we don't want to give any more money to the Greeks. So that's a problem for the SPD, and therefore they've never played this up big. And what's so interesting is that I think in spite of that effort to keep Europe out of the campaign, it's forcing its way in these last 3 weeks. That's going to be very interesting to see.
And Christiane Meyer, the sentiment on the part of many Germans, as Quentin Peel suggested, that the Germans are pretty much fed up with having to pay, if you will, for the failures on the part of other countries, is being channeled by a new party called the Alternative for Germany. And some pundits are saying they could be a deal breaker. They could make or break this election by reaching 5%. Would you agree?
I think it's unlikely, but not impossible, because they sort of, many people who have this sort of frustration and deep suspicion against both parties that they're not being told the truth, and that the euro might actually go down the drain, and they don't know, if their savings are really safe and all that, they might sort of flock over to them. But then again, this party is new, it's small, and it is very limited. I mean, it doesn't really have a party program that is worth mentioning.
Well, their party program is not to kick Greece out of the euro, but rather to quit the euro.
Exactly.
They're saying Germany should quit the euro?
So I think, generally speaking, yes, 5% possible, but not very likely. And I think they really play with the fears of people, which is not a good thing to do. On the other hand, the fear, of course, only exists when people are insecure and they don't know, did the government really tell us the truth, you know? Because now we heard there's a third package for Greece on the way, so, and before they said no. So, what else is waiting there, you know, behind that curve? So everybody is really scared, or really, I would say, considerably scared. Germans are not that scared, generally speaking, but a little, a little scared. So maybe some people will flock over, yes, but I don't think it's.
It's not just the 5% point that matters. It isn't just if they get seats in Parliament. If they get 3 or 4, and most of it's coming, let us say, from the Liberal Free Democrats,
yes,
or from the right wing of the CDU, this could be the deciding factor in denying Merkel the majority she wants. And it could, so that's why that really matters. They've got quite a slick campaign. You look at their campaign posters, there's clearly a bit of money there. Now, they're a bunch of rather boring professors and slightly wacky nationalists. It's a funny mixture, desperate not to be seen as extreme right-wingers. So they're not running, for example, as every other Eurosceptic party does in Europe, with an anti-immigration program. They're very careful about this. If they did, I think actually they'd be much more dangerous in Germany because it's an issue that hasn't really come through. And so we wait to see. It's a very interesting question.
Interesting question indeed, Eric Hansen. Chancellor Merkel seems to have ruffled some feathers here recently when she called the SPD an unreliable partner. And they're saying the SPD is not reliable when it comes to Europe, that we cannot trust the SPD to handle the many important and crucial issues that are awaiting us when it comes to dealing with Euro and the Euro crisis. The SPD very furious about that.
Yeah, I don't see an actual difference between the CDU and the SPD. I think that the SPD would have maybe a chance to have a different Euro policy if it had a coalition with the lefts, with the Linken. The Linken has a clear anti-austerity standpoint, and they may force SPD to go against austerity. But in a grand coalition, which kind of looks like, frankly, I think SPD would just do what the CDU wants. I think that's just talk.
And the grand coalition, of course, is a very likely option, but not the only one that is awaiting Germany after September 22nd. There are, of course, other parties that are in the run that are hopeful that they're going to make it into government. And they, too, had their own debate one day after the huge TV debate between Merkel and Steinbrück. Let's have a look.
Veteran FDP politician Rainer Brüdele would like to continue the partnership with Chancellor Merkel's Conservatives. He's promising modest tax cuts.
We'll start to pay down the debt, and we can ease the burden somewhat.
Green Party co-leader Jürgen Trittin would like to see more action on climate change.
We want to ensure there's 100% renewable energy.
Left Party leader Gregor Gysi is critical of the growing gap between rich and poor. He says his party would be willing to forge an alliance with the SPD and the Greens.
If our three parties get more votes than the Conservatives and the FDP, we'll have to explain why we don't take advantage of that.
But will the Left Party really be able to shake off their image as the successors to East Germany's Communist Party?
Well, Quentin Peel, the SPD has repeatedly said that they're ruling out any sort of coalition with the leftist parties. Do you think that's wise?
I think it's wise. I'm not 100% sure that it won't happen. I'm about 90% sure that it won't happen. I don't think that Per Steinbrück could rule with them, and I don't think that Frank-Walter Steinmeier could rule with them. And the reason is actually not so much their domestic policy, where I think it's doable, it's their international policy. They're anti-NATO, and they're very skeptical about a lot of the EU agenda. They would say they're actually not anti-EU, but they're definitely anti-NATO. And they want Germany out of NATO. They want, ideally, NATO dissolved and then Germany out of NATO. Now, that would be very difficult for an SPD to live with. So their red lines are difficult. The other thing is, of course, the poison of the past. One, half the party are former communists or sympathies with former communists who treated the Social Democrats like dirt in East Germany and just made them disappear. And the other half are traitors to the SPD in West Germany. So there's a lot of bad personal baggage. I don't think red, red, green will happen. And it's interesting because that rules out probably the second most likely option in the elections.
And the Free Democrats, the current partner in the coalition with Chancellor Merkel, have to even fear of making it into parliament altogether this time around. Christiana Maya, they have their work cut out for themselves.
Yes, it's going to be close, and they know it. And for them, it's a question of life and death, really, because if they don't get in, I mean, they're pretty much done. They're not anywhere else really important. So
they reached 15%, almost
Yes.
15% 4 years ago. Now they even have to fear to get 5%. What went wrong in the time span of 4 years?
I would say everything, basically. I mean, Merkel calls this government the most successful ever, but it was probably the most ridiculous ever when it comes to the interaction between these two parties, because they were fighting from day one to the last day. And that is something the German voters don't like so much. And they didn't really get a lot done in the beginning. I mean, there were like 2-3 years, nothing happened, absolutely nothing. It was just status quo. And so they have to earn the trust anew. And nobody knows what makes them so interesting. You know, what do they stand for? They used to stand for civil rights, and they have pretty much given that up. And they came back a little bit, but not that much. Apart from that,
it's the most vague campaign of any party. It is very difficult to say that's what the FDP would do in power.
So people vote them so they don't have to give their vote to Merkel again. So sometimes as like a counterbalance thing.
Or Merkel's people give their votes to the Liberals in order that they shall... Yes. So it's tactical voting, which is very dangerous for Angela Merkel, because in the last big state election that we had here in Lower Saxony, a lot of Christian Democrats voted for the Free Democrats, and they didn't win as a result. So it's a very dangerous move. So Angela Merkel is desperately fighting in all her television clips and so on, both votes for the CDU.
Fear factor FDP,
And Harry Kansan, another possible coalition partner for Chancellor Merkel would be the Greens. That would be the first in the history of Germany on the federal level. The Greens had a pretty decent showing in the polls until they announced large tax rises that they were going to impose after the election. Do you think they shot themselves in the foot here?
Yeah, well, they did that every election since they started. You know, that's the green way of doing politics. I do like the idea of the CDU and the Greens together. Ideologically, the Greens would not like it, but politically, they're very close, actually. The Greens are not really a radical leftist group anymore. I can imagine that may be the only way that the CDU gets power outside of a grand coalition.
Could be.
It would be fascinating. It probably would be the most conservative government Germany's had since the Second World War.
That's right.
The Greens, I think, would lose 20 or 30% of their members if they went in, and Angela Merkel might lose some of hers. But there are significant minorities in both parties that really want to do it. And I think Jürgen Trittin, the key man in the Green Party, would love it. He wants to be in power.
He wants to be in power, yes, because he hasn't been in power for a while. So I think you're both right. There's a lot of bourgeois, they have a lot of bourgeoisie in common, the green bourgeoisie and the conservative bourgeoisie. At the same time, there is a difference in culture that is significant. So even when you go to one of their party conventions, you see it, you know, you can see it, you can feel it, you can smell it. It's really different. So to overcome that would be very, very difficult. I think it works on a regional basis or local basis. It does work occasionally, but
there'd be constant tension, I think.
Yeah,
but
it would be interesting.
And in the upper house, the Bundesrat, there's not a single vote for black-green. So they'd have a constant tension between Parliament's lower house and upper house.
So whom she really rules with, you could argue, for Chancellor Merkel. A lot of critics are saying doesn't matter as long as she stays in power. She's very flexible that way, her critics say. But one thing that even her critics have to concede is that she's very popular. She's very popular in Germany among the electors, and it's very hard to get to her, isn't it? It's very hard to criticize her. It's a bit like Ronald Reagan back then, whom people called the Teflon president. Yeah. She's a bit like a Teflon chancellor, isn't she, Eric Hansen?
Yeah. She is, but I'm not sure that that's a bad thing, because this is a democracy, and so a chancellor should try to do what most people want. So when she came into power and she said absolutely no atomic energy. We don't want that. Nuclear energy is out for us. No, I'm sorry. It was the other way around. She would say we're sticking with atomic energy, and then as soon as Fukushima happened, and everyone in Germany was upset about it and scared out of their wits. It was a huge wave of fear in Germany. She picked up on that immediately, and she said she switched, 180 degrees. She said, okay, we're going to stop atomic energy. And that is a way, in a sense, that is like Clinton, who ruled by the polls. She picked up on what is really wanted in Germany, and she gave the Germans what they wanted. That sounds better than someone like the Lincoln, who will give Germany only what 15% of Germans want. She wants to she wants to make everyone happy. That's democracy.
But she is a bit of a phenomenon, isn't she, Quentin Peel? Even the NSA scandal, a lot of Germans in the polls indicate that a lot of Germans are not happy the way she's handled the NSA crisis, or scandal even, if you want to call it as such. And yet, it doesn't really show in the polls.
No. I mean, it's not just that she's a good politician in terms of instinct for power. She does represent what Germans want today. It's not changing, sticking with it, safe pair of hands, very thoughtful. I mean, this is a woman who takes forever to make up her mind. She's the mistress of the art of hesitation, title of a recent book about her. She hesitates. Germans like that. So she's actually caught the mood of the moment. The problem for Germany is that they end up with a very unreforming chancellor, and there are things that do need to change in Germany. Germany needs to open up on services, needs to open up on families, policy and immigration, and these things are not moving fast with Angela Merkel. So a wonderful instinct for power, but no great vision for the future.
True. She is very complacent right now. And I think that has become very obvious in the debate, the TV debate, and I think that is something, it works for her, it works also against her. The question is now, will it work against her enough to give the other guys a chance? And I think, even though you're completely right, Germans don't want change and they want things to be safe and keep going, they also see that, the autobahns are breaking down, bridges, infrastructure is really breaking down, and all that hasn't been taken care of in the last few years. So there is also a certain amount of, I wouldn't really know the right word, a certain amount of feeling uneasy about it. Is it really good enough or not? But the question is, does that transfer and translate into votes eventually? But I think, looking at her and seeing her for all these years, when she was in the debate, she noticed, I have to do something. I can't go on like that, because obviously Steinbrück, with his more offensive way of dealing with issues, not necessarily with her as a person, came across quite well.
Let's be clear, if she were to lose this election, the outside world would be astonished.
Yes.
They don't believe there's anybody else in Germany who exists except Angela Merkel. So it would be, for the outside world, an extraordinary upset.
But the outside world it concentrates on people, and Germany is not quite like that. We have this whole, I guess, 60% of all Germans love Merkel, but in the polls, her party only gets 25, 30% or something. I mean, that's not even, in America, a landslide is 70% of the vote. She's not, if she gets a landslide, it's going to be 35% of the vote, not even 50%, which is ridiculous. So we talk a lot about how she herself is popular, but in the end, that doesn't really change anything.
The government that Germany really wants? They want a red-green government with Angela Merkel as chancellor.
That's true. No, she should change parties. Right. She may, as she loses the election, she may immediately change parties.
Well, there's one, that certainly would be an interesting notion to entertain for her. There's a notion out there in the theory, Quentin Peel, that Chancellor Merkel might resign, even if she gets reelected, might resign 2 years into her election into her third term. Do you give any credence to that theory?
Well, it's been flatly denied, but tactically it would be quite clever, because if she went to halfway and then handed over to a successor with time for that successor to establish themselves, or perhaps one might say herself, if it were Ursula von der Leyen, as the new dominant figure, that would really be a very clever tactical move vis-à-vis the next election. But I think Angela Merkel is still very much enjoying exercising power. She does enjoy her job. It's quite remarkable. This is not a woman who's looking bored with it. She is enjoying herself.
Christiane Meyer, will Chancellor Merkel get a third term after September 22nd?
That, I don't know, but I think she would like a third term, and she would probably like to work for 4 years. Yes, that's what she says, at least. And she denies having any plans to resign after 2 years. If she gets it, I don't know. It might be, and I think she definitely would enjoy every minute of it.
Eric Hansen, your guess?
I think she loves power too much. She loves sitting in that armored car. She's going to stay. But having said that, if she does leave, it would be very impressive, because it would show that she has an ideal beyond power, which is to keep the party in power, a loyalty to the party, which I don't think she has. But if she does have it, that would be impressive in retrospect.
Well, it's not long from now. We will know, of course, less than 3 weeks to go before the German election. Chancellor Merkel is up for her third terms, and by all accounts, she will remain in power for at least another two years. If not 4 years, then at least another 2 years. I want to thank my guests for a very spirited discussion, very colorful, very entertaining. Quentin Peel, Christiane Meyer, and Eric Hansen. We will, of course, be much wiser 3 weeks from now. And we at DW, of course, will continue to follow this election until the very last minute to see who will rule and steer Germany for the next 4 years, hopefully in the right direction. I want to thank you out there for tuning in. I look forward to seeing you again next week for a new edition of Quadriga.